Good morning. Welcome to Saga Saturday. Wow. All right. I'm Lula Brennan's daughter, self-professed Norse nerd, kicking off our fourth. This is our fourth episode on Egil Saga, and we're not done yet, kids. Kinhild, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Bercy, and then we'll get this show rolling.
So, hello, my name is Dam Kinhild the Library. I love languages, guys. I love languages, and I especially love dead Germanic languages. Like, that is my jam. So that's how I got into this, and now this is like the highlight of my week, is I get to sit here and we talk about weird Norse shit. Last week it was boat chases across various parts of the North Sea, being chased by the King of Norway. It was very exciting. And this week we're excited to find out what happens next in the life of Egil Skallagrimsson, that very ugly but valiant and excellent poet, but so ugly. Like, everybody agrees. So ugly.
I'm Bercy Edvardsson. I can hear myself twice.
Right? There's quite an echo there.
How do I fix that?
I don't know. Are you on a laptop?
I am on a laptop.
That's probably why. The mic and speaker are really close together, so they sometimes set up a feedback.
Usually I don't have this problem here.
So the audio is coming across pretty clear, at least for me.
Okay. Well, I don't hear it anymore. So
better. We'll take it.
In any case, I'm Bercy Edvardsson. And I'm so excited about this episode because the section of Egil Saga we're going over today includes all of my favorite parts. So I'm so stoked for today.
Alrighty. Well, I'm going to share this link out in a couple of places. So why don't you two arm wrestle over who is going to catch our viewers up to where we're at?
Go ahead, Bercy.
Oh, no. I have to think.
Okay, so where we started, let's get rid of my mom's bank information. Where we started, don't accidentally flash that on the screen. We started with this guy named Kveldulf. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning, do a quick recap.
All right.
All
the way back to the beginning, do a quick recap in case people haven't been watching. So we have this guy Kveldulf. He's kind of a grouchy bastard. He gets real grouchy at night, which is why his name is Nightwolf. That's what Kveldulf translates as. Kveldulf has two sons, Grim, who becomes known as Skallagrim because he's bald, and Thorolf. I think it's Thor. Is it? I'm down.
Yeah, it's Thorolf.
Now I'm down. Okay, so we have Grim and Thorolf. Grim takes after his father. He's kind of ugly. He's grumpy. Both Kveldulf and Grim both have these very, they're strongly coded as berserkers. Mm-hmm. Thorolf, on the other hand, beautiful Viking, handsome, probably 6'5", blonde hair, blue eyes.
As opposed to 7 foot tall, which all the rest of his family is.
Yeah. So he's a shorty in the crew.
He's
but that's
short
fine.
in the family.
He actually fits through doorways and stuff like that, right?
Right.
Thorolf becomes best buddies with this guy named Bard. Bard is the son of Brynolf, who is the son of Bjorgulf, who are never allowed to name children again. Bjorgulf had another wife, Hildred, who had two sons, Hrerik and Herrick, proving, again, no more naming.
No naming.
That family cut off, right? Completely. So the Hildred sons, Hrerik and Herrick, get real mad at Brynolf because after their father's death, he refuses them their inheritance. Bard later Bard, the son of Brynolf, again refuses these sons the inheritance. And then Thorolf, after Bard dies and Thorolf marries his widow, again refuses these guys their inheritance. So now they're pissed and they start speaking ill in the ears of the king. The king and queen start kind of hating on the men of Myrna, which are the descendants of Kveldulf. So things go poorly. Thorolf eventually dies. Skallagrim has two sons. Egil, who is the main character in the story. Oh, Thorolf is killed.
He's killed. Yeah.
Yeah,
by the king's men.
Right.
By the king actually himself. Kills.
Very important.
Right.
So now we have Skallagrim. Skallagrim has 2 sons. Egil, hero of our story, very ugly, very smart, very brave, so ugly. And his brother
also got a big temper.
Big temper, coded berserker, right? Like important. So he has a brother named Thorolf. Again, taking after his uncle, this Thorolf, the small one in the family at merely 6'5", blonde hair, blue eyes, gorgeous man, out on his ships, doing his thing, living a good life. And constantly these guys are being told, don't follow the king, it will only go poorly. And the Thorolfs follow the king because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like the king comes to you and says, be my man, and you're supposed to be like, yeah, buddy.
Do the thing.
They do it, but it's not what you're supposed to do in that family, right? So things go poorly. Thorolf, Egil and the king don't get along at all. There's a bunch of other stuff going on. And then we move into the second round of the fights. What's the word I'm looking for here, guys?
Feud.
The feud.
Yeah.
So we've got this old feud. Now we've got the new feud. And the new feud feels a lot like the old feud because there's a lot of very similar kind of
names.
Right. Yeah, names are similar. What we're fighting about is similar. The people involved. I mean, really, this is generations of feuding. This is the Clampetts and the.
I don't know, but it's West. At this point, just think West Virginia Hill Country.
Yeah,
right?
The Hatfields and McCoys, right?
There we go.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Where I got Clampetts from.
So Skallagrim, the sons of Skallagrim both end up married to the same woman at various points. She was married to Thorolf. Thorolf gets killed. Then she's like, well, Egil comes along and he's like, hey, I'll marry you. And she's like, look, I know you. This isn't a terrible choice. Sure.
Not a terrible choice.
Egil, not a terrible choice. It's just his byline.
That should be on everybody's dating profile. Ooh, it's not a terrible choice.
Anyway, somebody else is gonna have to pick up because I am out of steam.
Yes.
Oh God.
Sorry. Let's see. We've got. Where did you just end?
I said
we've got just sort of like really condense all of that. There's just Kveldulf and sons have each generation gets in a tussle with the king of Norway, whoever it is at the time. We just recently got through England. We went to England with Egil, and he became a good friend of Ethelstan because he fought real hard for him. But unfortunately, his brother Thorolf died there. He gets these 2 chests of silver, which are important. We'll talk about them later. He gets these 2 chests of silver from King Ethelstan of England for compensation for both fighting and also for his brother dying. Then time passes and some things happen, and including like settling down and making a farm and having some kids, right? And then Egil goes back to England and finds out that the king of Norway, who is now a bit more, is now disgraced. I can't remember exactly why, but he's now, or at least he's losing power. And so he's taken a few of his men, including Arnbjorn, Egil's bestie, to England, and Egil puts himself into Arnbjorn and then the king's hands to be like, let's just cut out this feud right now. And the king's like, I'm gonna kill you. And instead, Egil composes 20 stanza dropa, which is now called Huvudstropa. Huvud means head, and so it was the dropa that he composed that in payment, after he performed it for the king gave him his head, as in you get to leave. And Egil makes a good quip about, like, even though it's such an ugly gift, I'm happy with it. And then he gets to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So something we mentioned last time was that this is the most basic droppa in term like this is not a droppa composed with a lot of like focus on the recipient. This is just like the king. He is a good man. He is valiant in battle.
See, the king runs the king. Like it's very Dick and Jane sort of like just putting words in the right order to appease the dude, right?
The king is a warrior. The king feeds the ravens. The king is a breaker of rings. He's a generous man. He's a king.
I totally want to do like a Dick and Jane, run droppa now. Oh, Lord.
And it's great. Actually, we're going to see another droppa that is made with so much heart for Arnbjorn in the section we're covering today. Arnbjorn, the guy who helped Egil keep his life in this situation. And Arnbjorn, once again, anyway, sorry. I love Arnbjorn so much. We'll get to him.
Arnbjorn is pretty awesome. So we'll also note that at this point, Egil's father has passed away.
Right.
Hiding his own silver out in the moors somewhere, not telling anybody where it is. So there's some silver hoarding around here.
Well,
he's supposed to divvy it up amongst the farm, and he doesn't.
Not so
well, he doesn't because he's pissed because Egil has been keeping the silver that he got in compensation for Thorolf's death from Athelstan and not giving it out like he was supposed to. Like Athelstan says, give this to your father in compensation for his son's death. And Egil's like, well, Dad, you're doing fine. Like you're
silver. I'll hold on to it until you need it.
Right. And Skallagrim is just like, excuse me, what? And then proceeds to haul his silver, which is not inconsequential, out to a moor, bury it where nobody will ever find it.
Come back to the farmstead and die.
And sit on his bed. So he sits on his bed and then just croaks, right? And so the next morning they find him. He's frozen solid in this position, which is not normal.
With his eyes open, he's just...
Right. Proceeds to do everything possible to ensure that Skallagrim, once buried, stays buried. Like, they do not want the return of Skallagrim. They do not. So they make sure that they put him by water.
They take him
out they cut a hole in the wall, take him out through the wall. They put him by water. They sprinkle water on his grave. If I remember right. I think so. Maybe that's another death.
For a while.
They put him on a boat for a little while. And they move him to a location that's far from the
far away. So when he does come back to haunt, he's haunting like this. It's like out there, away. Go away. All right.
So if you don't want someone haunting the last person you want haunting a place would be a berserker like Skallagrim,
right?
Because they come back. If you go check out our October 2020 episodes to learn more about how to deal with Draugr and the nature of Draugr, but they come back corporeal, folks.
You don't want that bad juju coming back because it ends poorly for everyone.
So all right, that's where we left off.
That's where we stopped. Yeah, he got his head back, and now I think he just goes back to Iceland for a little while, and that's where we left off.
That's where I'm just checking. Are we in Iceland or are we in Norway? We're in Norway.
Well, he's about to go back to Norway, so it doesn't really. The narrative kind of is like, and he went back to Iceland and he farmed for a bit,
and then he went back to okay,
and then so a little later, if it's all right, I can go on into it.
Yeah, we can jump into it. I do. There's a that's fine. There's a part in this chapter. Is it this chapter? 66. So
yeah.
Now I want to. There's the throat biting incident that I.
Yes, I'm so excited about.
Okay.
This. Yes,
can't skip the throat biting incident. All right, Darcy, why don't you? Now that we're all back up to speed and we've spent 20 minutes boring our audience while we figure out what the hell we're doing, let's get back to Norway. Yes, back to Norway.
So he goes back to Norway because King Eric has died. So the guy who he had his whole beef with, who of course he wrote this kind of lame but good enough poem about, I mean, a beautiful poem, but not really specific. And then he goes back to Norway because he's like, hey, remember all those lands that I wanted to get at the assembly, blah, blah, blah. There was this whole bit where, and honestly, like, Egil's claim is not good. It's okay. Not a very solid claim. It's really I have beef with you specifically, and I want to, like, because he did this whole curse. He said this whole curse at the Gulathing assembly. He was like, anyone who's in your family who tries to own that land, you're cursed, and I'm gonna kill you all. And then he goes and he like just murders a bunch of people a little like shortly after that, and then he comes back. So years later, and he comes back and he's like, okay, so you're living on my land. And he ends up throwing down he's like, all right, come to the Gulathing again. And we're going to have a one-on-one. We're going to hash this out in court. And he gets there. And Atli is the guy who he's bringing this suit against. And they bring their suit, and Egil is just like, you know what? Screw this whole court business. Let's fight. Let's go. You and me, one-on-one, right here, right now. And Atli's like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's do it.
That's a good plan.
So they both get all girded up. It's another great section if you want to read about people. Like, the Egil Saga is great if you want to see blow-by-blow battles, which is not actually all that common in sagas. Usually they're just like, they fought and so won. Yeah?
I think we're skipping chunks. So he goes to the Gulathing assembly, and he makes his plea to Hakon, who was the brother of Eric, and says, you can't, so he goes to Hakon, he says, you can't keep silent about an important case like this, sir, said Egil. Everyone in this land, native or foreign, which I thought was really interesting, because again, we've got that callback to other Germanic law codes where you have native or foreign. Everyone in this land, native or foreign, has to obey your word. And I've heard you're making new laws in the country to secure everybody's rights. And I know that you'll let me have mine along with everyone else. As I see it, I've got both the family background and goodwill here in Norway to hold my own against Atli the Short. But as to the disagreement with King Eric, all I can say is I went to see him. When we parted, he told me I could go in peace wherever I liked. And then he, I'd like to offer you my service, blah, blah, blah. Hakon is like, you're never going to be my retainer, my guy. Right. This is never going to happen. You have caused too many problems for my family. However, my foster father was Athelstan. I know how much Athelstan loves you. So I will grant you your rights in this case. And, you can have this land that you're fighting with Atli about, which Atli, really quick aside. So Atli the Short, the cool thing about the name Atli is it comes into the Germanic language via it's the Norse equivalent of Attila. So this is coming out of these early stories about the battle between the Huns and the Goths. Mm-hmm. And so that's like a lot of the Volsung saga deals with this, right? Like there's this whole chunk in the Volsung saga where you have the Goths and the Huns fighting. And so Attila, the name Attila, which is a Hunnish name, comes into Old Norse from these stories as Atli. And so you'll see in the Volsung saga and in the Poetic Edda, Atli shows up all over the place. And so here you have an example of a family saga where that name Atli appears. Family sagas are much less legendary. How much truth is ultimately available from them? That's like, you got to remember these events are happening well before they're being written down, right? So, but it's interesting to me that the name Atli survives in Old Norse as just a given name to this dude who, like, he's not anybody special. He's just Atli the Short, which when you compare him to Egil could mean that he is a solid 6 foot. God knows, right? Like, short here is relative. But anyway, that's my aside on the name. I think it's a really cool name. So he gets the grant of land, and then he goes sort of off and doing. And he ends up, there's this great little fight scene with a bunch of poetry about this guy named Liot. And Liot is a berserker and a duel fighter. And everybody hates him This is not the first nor the last time we'll encounter a berserker that nobody likes.
Yeah.
Right. As much as we all sort of, there's this narrative, I think, in modern popular culture is the berserker is this like heroic, sort of very like arch level of masculinity, right? Like we talked about the Nazi episode.
And for for a little context, the reason for this duel is Lot wants to marry Arinbjorn's sister. She does not want to be married to this berserker, so Egil takes up her cause, basically.
Right.
And,
yeah.
So that's how he got involved in that.
So anyway, it's interesting that as much as today we view the berserker as this like superhero warrior guy, they're like, nobody likes you.
Right.
Nobody. We don't want
you. Dangerous.
You're useful to have in very specific instances, but the rest of the time, it's a problem. And this is not the first or the last saga that kind of discussion, like even in the legendary sagas.
Yeah. Like Hrolf Saga Kraki. You will often see like there's a reason why like kings have like 12 berserkers in the retinue, and like that's the place where a berserker should go, because then they're actually going to be like, you know,
kind of managed,
some use and sort of contained,
corralled and directed towards, you know, this way towards the enemy. Like,
right, literally.
Yeah.
The berserker towards the enemy, not towards their own children. Because, like, even Skallagrim in this, right? He almost, like, he kills one kid and then almost kills his own son. Yeah. And, like, this is a big problem. You can't just go around killing people just because you're flying into a rage because the sun went down. Like,
so I'm having sort of this thought, right? Like, one of the things that makes me nuts with modern pop culture is the obsession that some groups have for the Punisher. And this feels very much like that, right? Like Berserkers and the Punisher. The Punisher is not a... Guys, I like Frank Castle as much as the next person. I like reading Punisher comics. Punisher's not a good guy.
No.
He's not a hero. He's not somebody you're like, I want to be like that. If you're identifying with the Punisher, there's a problem. If you're identifying with the Berserkers, there's a problem. They're not your friends.
Nope.
So anyway, there's that. So he goes, he finds this Berserker, he fights this Berserker, and he makes a number of outstanding, just sort of, he throws down these verses. So he sees, when Egil sees Liot, he makes this verse. Friedgeir's sure to fail. So friends, let's fight and guard the young girl against this maniac, this valiant, Valkyrie-maddened, shield-swallowing villain. This glaring godfester goes to his own death, which, okay. So, and then Liot sees him and hears the verse and then is like, to which Egil responds, it's not fair to refuse, Liot, this little favor. I'll play swinging the sword with this sallow-faced man. He hasn't a hope. I'll hack him down when I'm ready. And at this massacre on Moor, no mercy from the poet. Which, should a poet ever offer mercy? I don't think so. I think poets never truly offer mercy, right? Like, even when they're, you know, anyway, there's a moment. So, Egil and Liot fight. He's carrying, briefly, just in case you were curious, Egil is carrying his usual shield with him, and the sword Adder was at his waist, and the sword Dragonvendel in his hand. So he's two swords and his usual shield, whichever one that is, and he enters the combat area, but Liot is not ready yet. Of course Liot's not ready. Why would Liot be ready? Right? Like, this was his idea, but here we go. And so Egil brandishes his sword and speaks another verse. Let's strike with sword flash to shatter the shield, to batter the blade till enemy bleeds. Play with the pale man, then pitch him to the earth. Stop his mouth with steel and serve him up as carrion. Which choice words, my guy. Like you're out there. So you've got this giant, as we've discussed previously, ugly man who is now, he's got two swords on, he's got a shield, which is probably enormous because he's enormous, and he's out there and he's speaking these very eloquent, frankly, much more personalized verses than the Droppa that he composed to save his own life, just to piss off Liat. And Liat's just like clearly not mentally capable of keeping up with this guy.
No.
Right? Like Liat's out there to fight, and he's like, let's do this. And then you have Egil out there just like ugly as sin, but also speaking beautiful words, right?
Clever, so, very clever though. Yeah.
It also.
Oh, go ahead.
This section, which I just completely forgot to read, which is why I skipped it. I love this section because it looks it feels a lot like the Iliad, where all these Greek warriors are just sort of like throwing quips at each other. Let's pause the battle for a second and analyze what just happened with some nice little things to say. And boom, boom. Oh, my literally favorite part, quick aside, of the Iliad is when somebody throws a big rock at a charioteer and it like crushes his face inward and his eyes pop to the dirt and roll around. It's very gruesome. And he falls backwards off the chariot. And whoever had thrown it, I can't remember which Greek hero it was like, look at the dive that man has. Think about how many oysters he could get from the bottom of the sea in calm or stormy weather with a dive like that. I'm like, wow. Yeah.
So that's how we measure a man, is how they can oyster gather.
I am keeping that quip the next time I watch the Spanish national team in the World Cup. And that is coming down again and again as they throw themselves to the ground, waffle about because, oh God, I stubbed my toe.
Oh my God. Okay. All right.
Not important. So they fight the duel.
We haven't even gotten to the throat biting incident. Let's go.
I'm rushing here. So they fight the duel. Liat wards off Egil's blow with the shield, but Egil keeps pressing him with stroke after stroke so hard that Liat couldn't hit back and had to give ground in order to find room to strike. But Egil stayed close to him, pounding away, which I'm sorry.
I know, right?
Stroke after stroke, pounding away. I'm 5. Okay. So that Liat was chased all over the field and then outside the stone markers. And that's how the first bout ended. So apparently they're fighting a bear pit. Yep. So he knocks him out of the ring. Liat asks for a break, which Egil agrees to. So they sit down for a rest and Egil makes his first. I feel this flashing swordsman falls back when I force him. He's afraid, this unfortunate overfed fighter, this blood-sucking battler, backs away from my blows and beats a retreat from the bald-headed bard. So, okay. It was a rule at the time when you're dueling, if the challenger wins, he gets everything, but if he loses, he has to redeem himself by paying a previously agreed sum, which is really interesting, right? Like, this is a way to dissuade like excessive dueling. Where in the United States in the 19th or 18th century, we tried to dissuade it by just passing laws, but then New Jersey was like, come here. Everything in Jersey. So here instead what they're doing is they're like, okay, if you win, you get the prize. If you lose, you got to pay, which nobody wants to do, right? Who wants to pay money? So they come up with this thing, and if a foreigner dies, there's all this business. Egil tells Liat to get ready. I want to settle this. They fight some more. Liat was forced to back away, and his shield was no use to him anymore. Then Egil caught Liat just above the knee, slicing off his leg, which is an impressive strike. Like, just above the knee, that's coming through the femur. Mm-hmm. That is a lot. That's a lot. And Liat drops down dead on.
Wow. Oh, goodness. I don't think I have enough coffee for you today.
So slices.
All right, so let's talk off. Liat falls to the ground on the spot, dead. Egil goes over to Fridger and others and was thanked kindly for his deed. Egil spoke a verse. The feeder of wolves fell, worker of evil deeds. The poet chopped Liat's leg off. I brought Fridger peace. I do not ask a reward from the splasher of gold for that. The spear's din was fun enough to fight with the pale man. So you don't need to pay me for killing this dude. I did it for fun.
I had a lot of fun.
All right.
All right.
Most people did not,
on.
nobody liked Liat, so they didn't care that he was dead. I have to leave that up there. He was Swedish, had no kinsman in Norway. So
so then we go to the section that I was.
So there we go.
I just literally skipped these chapters this morning.
You totally did.
Straight to 66. Okay, so in any case, Egil goes to Norway. As previously mentioned, he's like, all right, Atli, let's throw down. We're at the Gulathing Assembly. We're having another duel, one-on-one. We're seeing sort of, and we'll probably be talking about this when we talk about the structure of Egil's saga, but these episodes have a lot of like parallelism. Like, let's have one duel, let's have another duel, let's have one hospitality story, let's have another hospitality story, like kind of one right after another. And so he gets into this other duel, but Atli, this time, this is not like Liat. Atli is ready to fight. And he was strong and courageous, an experienced dueler, and skilled in the magic arts. And interestingly, for this duel, a huge old bowl was brought out, known as the sacrificial bowl. This kind of bowl. I realize that my accent makes them sound exactly the same. Not a cereal bowl. For the victor to slaughter. Sometimes there was one bowl, and sometimes each of the duelers brought his own. But in this case, we've just got one. And then basically they start fighting, and interestingly, they have, as we've seen earlier in the saga, where Egil had tied his sword. Both of them have their sword tied to their hands so that they can throw their spear. Which I'm really wondering what's going on with the dangling of a sword while you're trying to throw something. It just seems very dangerous, but it's so that they don't have to like draw their swords out very quickly. I still am curious as to how this would work without chopping off like your arm or slashing your hip. And so, but they both throw their spears. I think they both miss. And then they are just whacking at each other, and slowly their shields are starting to disintegrate. Egil manages to chop through Atli's shield. It's destroyed, and he grabs his sword with both hands and starts hacking at Egil. And Egil manages to land several blows, and like one right on the shoulder. And he's looking for any sort of like gap in his armor. And of course, this isn't plate armor or nothing. This is very sparse. And nothing is biting. And so, like, talk about rhino skin. This guy is using magic.
He's using magic
to keep the blows off of him. And so Egil saw that this was pointless. And in a very Beowulf move, drops his weaponry because the iron's not biting. And let's see. He threw down his sword and shield, ran for Atli, and grabbed him with his hands. By his greater strength, Egil pushed Atli over backwards, then sprawled over him and bit through his throat. Atli died on the spot. Egil rushed to his feet and ran over to the sacrificial bull, took it by the nostrils with one hand and by the horns with the other, and swung it over onto its back, breaking its neck. Then Egil went over to his companions. He spoke this verse. Black Slicer did not bite the shield when I brandished it. Atli the Short kept blunting its edge with his magic. I used my strength against that sword-wielding braggart. My teeth removed that peril. Thus I vanquished the beast. And then he fired the lance that he had fought over. So he won.
But seriously, bit through a dude's neck and then picked up a grown bull by its nostrils and horns and flipped it onto its back, breaking its back. Dude.
This must have been terrifying to watch. That man,
it's got to be blood, right?
Blood everywhere,
all over his face.
Just
I'm
His
imagining
big-
in Princess Mononoke when she's been sucking
Oh
the
yeah,
blood
the
out of
muscle.
and is
Yeah.
covered. Yeah. That, but in this case, he just killed somebody.
So
he's 7 foot tall. He's ugly as sin. He's probably sweating like a fucking pig.
Yep.
His face is now covered in blood. His chainmail probably smell like he's getting that fighter funk going. Where you've got you've got the adrenaline funk plus the just like exertion funk. And now coming off of this adrenaline high, which by the way, your copy reads much better in this section than mine does, because mine says he leaned over Atlee and bit his throat out, which feels much more like Interview with a Vampire than it does like a battle scene, right?
Like I'm imagining he just full on pounces onto him and just rips his throat out with his teeth.
Yeah, no, this comes off. My version comes off much more like he leaned over and took a little nip.
Yours has better translations of the poetry verses. Ours is a better translation of the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, but yeah. So he stinks to high heaven. He's just like dripping in sweat. He's bald, so I guess his hair's fine, but. He's just taking a chunk out of a guy's neck, so there's probably blood everywhere, and then he picks up this bowl high on adrenaline and just like throws it around like a WWE wrestler, and then like walks over and like pronounces some verse at these people, and he gets his property. Everybody else is probably like, peace out, my guy. Like,
right. That's all you, man. All you. Okay.
I really quick before we move on. I know that
there's so much more to go.
I know. They probably mean that he like grabbed it and just sort of twisted it sideways to get it onto his back. But I really prefer imagining him just going.
I totally see like WWE body slam. Okay, so Egil goes back to Iceland. He farms for a couple of years. Nothing happens. Blah 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 blah. Now Egil dies. Eric dies.
Nobody wanted to interfere in his affairs.
Yeah, no one wanted to interfere with his affairs. Hell no. Egil, you do you. So now Eric Bloodaxe has been killed on a Viking raid in Britain. Gunhild and her sons have gone to Denmark. And everybody that had been fighting with them left England. So England is now free of Eric and Gunhild and all of that. Arnbjorn went back to Norway. Egil decides to go back to Norway. And this is where he tries to reconcile with Hakon. We were a little out of sync there. But there's another great example of a verse gift exchange. So Egil goes to see Arnbjorn. They greet each other with great warmth. Egil stays there. Egil gives Arnbjorn an ornate sail, I can't talk, for a long ship and other fitting gifts. Egil spent the winter there. Arnbjorn held a great Yule feast to which he invited his friends and neighbors across the district. It was splendid, well attended. He gave Egil a customary Yuletide gift, a silk gown with ornate gold embroidery and gold buttons all the way down the front, which was cut especially to fit Egil's frame, because he's a big boy. He also gave him a complete set of clothes cut from English cloth in many colors. Arnbjorn gave all manner of tokens of friendship at Yuletide to the people who visited him, since he was exceptionally generous and a firm character. Egil made a verse. So he gets all these awesome clothes. And his payment, because in this world, verse is payment. From kindness alone, that noble man gave the poet a silk gown with golden buttons. I will never, ever have a better friend. Selfless Arnbjorn has earned the stature of a king or more, and a long time will pass before his like is born again. Well, that's my bestie right there, right?
He's so nice.
So we move from there on to him he's returned to Norway, and now he starts to go after the money that he was owed from killing Liat, which is interesting because if you think back, when he killed Liat, he says, I don't want a reward for this. I don't need anything from it, right? But now suddenly he's like...
and now it's like 5 years later, and he's like, coffers are getting a little low.
And yeah, so he's like, I should figure out how to get this money. And in this section, we have this really interesting moment where he talks about the friendship between me and the king is a shallow one, though I have to go by the old saying, take care of the oak, and live under its cloak, which we get a few.
Your translation's a little different.
Yeah.
Ours says, tend the oak if you want to live under it. And now I'm going to go find the Old Norse. Haha. Chapter 69. Nice.
So anyway,
oh my God, we're all 10-year-olds.
I thought this was interesting because we don't very frequently get these aphorisms in the sagas. Like there are a bunch, but they're doled out very sparingly. One of the most famous, of course, is "Cold is the Council of Women," but this is just a really kind of interesting one where like suddenly he's going, maybe I have to be nice to the king after generations of like
not right.
Don't do it, guys.
We've been feuding for a long time.
Right. So he goes to Hakon and he tries to make a deal about it, and Arnbjorn gets involved. And Arnbjorn, frankly, solves the issue by paying him and says, Egil, I'm paying you this money for the estates that belonged to Liat the Pale. It seems only fair to me that you should have it as a reward from my kinsman, Fridigir, and myself for defending his life against Liat. I know you did it for my sake, and for that reason, I'm only too pleased to see that you're not cheated out of your lawful rights in this matter. Egil takes the money, and suddenly he's happy again. So Egil and money have kind of...
yeah, he gets groovy when he doesn't have, when he doesn't feel like he's getting his fair share. So Arnbjorn spent the winter in his lands. They went raiding. So we have a good selection of ships, 3 longships prepared for the journey. Egil joined them at the helm of one of the ships. They went up to Saxony. Down.
Oh yeah, this is the part where
So in the autumn, they went north on more raids. They moored their ships off of Frisia. Let's see. So there's a point where they're separated. There's 2/3 of them go onto land and are like routing out these Frisian villagers, basically, and 1/3 of the men stay with the ships to protect the ships. All of the villagers ran for their lives when they noticed the Viking raiders, and Vikings set off in pursuit. Then they found another village and a third. Everyone who was able to fled them. The land was flat. There were ditches full of there were ditches dug in places full of water. These were meant to separate fields and meadows, but in some places there were bridges for crossing over made of logs with planks on the floor. All the villagers fled to the forest. Once the Vikings had ventured quite deep inland, the Frisians mustered forces in the woods. Then, when there were more than 300 of them, they set off to confront the Vikings and fight them. A fierce battle ensued, and in the end, the Frisians fled and the Vikings chased after them. Went in all directions, and so did their pursuers. Eventually, they split up into groups to go chase people. With a few men of his own, Egil set off in hot pursuit of a large group. The Frisians reached a ditch, crossed it, took the bridge away. When Egil arrived with his men on the other side, he took a run up and leapt over, but it was too far for the others, and none of them tried. Seeing this, the Frisians attacked Egil, and he defended himself. 11 of them attacked. He eventually killed them all. Then he went and put the bridge back so his guys could follow along with him, which is just like, dude, one of the things I'm going to do for our final wrap-up episode is I'm going to get all the body counts, because so many people die in this saga. Like, Egil kills, there was 11 right there. Right, just in a blip, right? So they took plunder, they took cattle, there was much raiding. I just love that section.
Doesn't he? I think the important thing is that he makes it up to Thorstein, right?
Yes.
And Thorstein is a member of Arnbjorn's family, because. Right? Arnbjorn's family? And
it's Thorstein is Arnbjorn's son.
Regardless, Arnbjorn's whole family has started to fall out of favor of King Hakon
nephew
for various reasons, and are getting exiled and sent away. And Egil goes up and to help out Thorstein, who gets it's right here, an ultimatum ordering him to go to Varmland to collect the tribute for the king, or else be banished from the realm. But the thing is about this errand he's been sent on is several other groups have been sent to go collect this tribute and not made it back. And so it's suspected that the Earl up there has been killing the
king's emissaries.
The king's emissaries, and then taking the gold back for himself. But he's claiming like they're just getting lost, or like
they never got here. I haven't seen them.
Yeah, it's not my problem that your emissaries are untrustworthy. And so this is the point at which Egil's like, well, how about I go in Thorstein's stead? Yeah. And instead, it's Thorstein.
Thorstein is
Arnbjorn's nephew. Yeah. And so Egil's like, I'll go in Thorstein's place with these guys who are coming from the king.
I'll get it sorted out for you.
Yeah. And it's kind of clear at this point that the king is like, I'll send you on this journey, either get out of my country or I'll send you on this like suicide mission. You're gonna go and you're gonna get killed by this guy. And Egil's like, not on my watch. So he goes. I'm going to continue looking up the words in this. Okay. I found the thing. So
they are, so Egil's traveling. He's in Denmark. Maybe it's not Denmark.
Aren't they in Sweden? Or oh no, they're in
I have a note that they're in Denmark. Anyway, they're at a farmer's place, Armand. They're traveling, and he's Egil and like a handful of men.
So I'm going to take over. If that's okay. So we get to Armand's, drinking at Armand's. They have this drinking party, and I got a little focus on this chapter because the idea, like wanting to learn more about Viking drinking parties, was kind of on my list of things to do.
Right.
So they lay the table out. Initially, they're served with these bowls full of sour curds. What exactly this is a little bit of a question mark, but it may be something like skyr.
Yeah.
So they're served these sour curds, which, if you remember back to the last drinking party that Egil was at, they were served lesser goods and people died. Yeah. So they're served these curds. Armand says he's very sorry he has no ale to offer. Egil and his men are tired and thirsty, so they drink the curds. Though none drink as fast as Egil. No other food is served other than this, and there's a good many people about, with the housewife sitting on her dais, her women folk beside her, and the farmer's daughter, 10 or 11 years old, playing on the floor. Housewife calls the girl over. Whispers something to her. The girl goes to Egil and says, "Mother asks you, Egil, to lend an ear. She gives you guidance. Stay on your guard. Spare your stomach." What was what she said. Appetites can ask for better to eat. So this is a moment where the housewife is kind of like, "Watch out, Egil." Armand slaps the girl and tells her to be quiet. The girl goes away. Egil flings down the bowl of curds, now almost empty. He's been guzzling this stuff, and he's like, pissed. So the bowls are cleared away. Tables were set up all over the room. People of the household take their eat, and the food is set out, which previously there was no food to offer. Now there's a whole feast going on. Right. So food set out, choice dishes are offered to Egil and his friends, and after a very strong brew of ale was served, so the ale that was not available, suddenly available. And everybody is just going to town. For a long time, Egil kept at it without cheating. He and his companions had drunk all they could take. Egil tossed back whatever they couldn't manage, which, by the way, this is an activity I have now been banned from, especially when Araya is involved. So if Araya can't finish her alcohol, it's not Claire's job to finish it for her.
Right.
So Egil tosses back everything they can't manage. They go on. Tables are taken down. Everyone's very drunk. And Armand drinks a toast. "I drink to you, Egil," and the servants and Egil's companions do the same thing. One man is given a job of serving each toast to Egil and his men. He keeps egging them on. Drink more, drink more, drink more. And Egil's starting to get a little suspicious about this, and his men are frankly getting pretty drunk.
Hosed.
At one point, Egil realizes he can't keep going any longer. He stands up, he walks across the floor to Armand, put both hands on his shoulders, presses him up against the pillar, and then vomits all over him. just like goes to town.
Full vomit comment right there.
Into his eyes, up his nostrils, into his mouth, and floods down his chest so that he's almost suffocated in this huge clearing of the stomach.
And his first breath that he can take, his first exhale. It's going down his open mouth, so it splurts a bunch more out because he's been choking on it. And he gets so gross.
It's the most disgusting. So now everybody's mad at Eggle. They call him the lowest of the low. If he wanted to vomit, he could have gone outside, not made a fool of himself in the drinking hall. I shouldn't be blamed for any of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The one of the very important things thematically here that happens is he vomits and then he says a verse.
Yep.
He immediately follows it up with or I guess you're about to get to that, huh? Because he goes and sits down first. Yeah. But yeah, he says a verse, with my cheeks swell, I repaid the compliments you served. I had heavy cause to venture my steps across the floor. Many guests thank favors with sweeter flavored rewards. But we meet rarely. Armod's beard is awash with dregs of ale.
Whoa.
And this, what I really want to pull out of this is we've got both literally he's vomited up ale, but he's also expelling the mead of poetry at the same time, and he's drawing that connection with the poem too. He's saying like, I'm also vomiting this poem onto you, essentially. And that ale there was poetry, and also this is poetry, and this is also ale, and it is all sort of.
So it's okay that I vomited in your house because it's all just part of the poetry.
And also, you were being a bad host.
You were being a bad host. Yeah. So then Armond jumps to his feet and runs out. Eggle goes and gets more to drink.
Yeah. Yep.
Because puke and rally, people. Puke and rally.
Yeah. So I have a friend who calls it boot and rally.
I usually, if I get that drunk, I go and take a nap after. Like I don't drink more. I stop. So we finish the night. Eggle and his companions have a great time. At the end of the night, they get up, which is impressive, take their weapons down from the wall where they had hung them, which I thought was really interesting because there was another point in a book I was reading about feasting in Anglo-Saxon England where they talk about they collect all the weapons and then you get them back at the end. Mm-hmm. I had found the guy makes the reference and then there's no footnote. So I have no idea where he's getting that from. Mm. Which is very frustrating. This is one of the few references I found where they're divesting themselves of their weapons before they start drinking, which is good. Do not drink with a loaded weapon, period. Like a sword, a knife, a gun, that should not be around when you are getting drunk.
Eggle is clearly enough of a loaded weapon in and of itself.
Exactly. So they collect their weapons and then they go out to the granary where the horses are kept and they sleep it off. Next, they get up in the morning.
At daybreak. Ours says daybreak. And I'm like, I don't know that I'd be getting up at daybreak if I had been doing that. But
so he sneaks up to Armond, draws his sword, takes Armond's beard in his other hand. The daughter and the wife jump up and they're like, please don't kill our male figure. And Eggle's like, well, for your sake, since you warned me about this crappy food that I was getting, fair enough. He makes another verse because of course he does. And then he chops off Armond's beard at his chin and then gouges out one eye so that it hangs over his cheek, which is disgusting, but also makes me wonder if that eye was actually salvageable. Because I know sometimes if you have, if the eye comes out, but it remains connected.
Yeah, you can pop it back in.
Yeah, I don't know if they could, but
I don't like that.
Yeah, no, it's super disgusting. There's actually a term for it, and I can't remember it right now, so I guess it doesn't matter.
I will not be Googling it.
We'll Google it.
Right, so then they go up. They travel to
Thor. Real fast.
What?
this is one of our examples that suggests that this is one of our main examples, this and a couple other times that happens in this and also other sagas of people getting their beards cut off and their eyes gouged out as a point towards the eyes and at least losing your sight. Whether or not having sight is a masculine thing, it is emasculating to lose an eye or both eyes or your sight. And this probably has to do with that Vaterblauther able-bodied versus disabled line that is also present in this sort of like hyper-masculine is like super able-bodied and also like you're a warrior, you're very capable of killing and doing all these things. Right. Whereas if you are blind or half blind, you are far less able to fight. And therefore now you've sort of pushed yourself. And then of course, when you pair it up with cutting off a beard, this sign of masculinity, this is a super, I've very much taken you down. Not only have I humiliated you in your house by vomiting all over you last night after I caught you because of your wife and daughter's help, I caught you being a bad host. Right. I punished you then for it, but I didn't do enough. And here's what I'm going to do this morning. I was going to kill you, but I'm not. Instead, I'm just going to super emasculate you by picking out your eye and cutting off your beard.
Yep.
So we move from there into his visit with Thorfinn, and this is a moment that I think is really fascinating. So Thorfinn has I think a sister or a daughter.
It's a daughter.
A daughter, thank you. Thorfinn has this daughter who is very sick, and so Thorfinn has had a farmer's son from nearby cut runes as a magical aid to healing her, but it's only gotten worse since those runes were cut. So Egil, in a very Odin-like moment, right, looks at the runes and is like, boy, howdy, this guy can't read. Like this is, and so he fixes the runic engraving. And suddenly she is doing much better because the grammar works now, right? Like again, like, and he speaks a verse which to me is like one of the most outstanding little bits of verse, and one that I cite every time I talk about like how to read runes when I do my runes with a linguist class.
Yeah.
None should write runes who can't read what he carves. A mystery mistaken can bring men to misery. I saw cut on the curved bone 10 secret characters. Those gave the young girl her grinding pain. So basically, if you don't know what you're doing,
don't do it.
Don't go around with it. Yeah. Leave it to an expert. Much like if you don't know what you're doing with, for example, immunology, don't read about it on Facebook. Talk to an expert. And there's my argument for the day. So he carves the runes, he fixes it, he puts it under the pillow, and she's up and she's great. Her father and mother are overjoyed. Next, he moves on to visiting Alf.
Oh, can I, just so we don't have to really mention it later, because the reason why this happens is mentioned later, but it's sort of just as an aside, and it doesn't really have to do with that part of the episode. But what had happened here was that boy who had carved the runes had actually wanted to carve a love spell to get her to love him, and he did it wrong and ended up making her very sick. So also maybe go about it a more reasonable way.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was going to bring that up. Yeah, it's the whole point, and that information doesn't come up for like 10 more chapters or something. They come back through again, right? Like it's a waste.
Right. Yeah, they come back around and then they're like, we figured out what happened while you were gone.
Yeah. Right.
So next we go to Alf. He runs into some guys in the woods. He kills some of them. There's a farmer named Alf the Wealthy who gives them lodging. He wasn't very sociable, but he got a good welcome. Next, he moves on to seeing the Earl.
I want to pause. I have one quick paragraph. So Alf warns Egil, "Hey, there's bad men out here in the woods. There's, and they and when Egil and his party leave Alf's, they're like, oh, hey, there's bad guys here in the woods. So it looks as though Alf may be telling the truth. Let us be prepared to expect an encounter. Egil and his men took off their cloaks and all their loose clothing and put them on the sleighs. He had taken along a long bast of rope in his sleigh, since it was custom on long journeys to have spare rope in case her reins needed mending. Then he took a huge slab of rock and placed it against his chest and stomach and strapped it tight with the rope, winding it around his body all the way to the shoulders. So he's now got this chunk of rock on his chest as armor. Because he's 7 freaking feet tall and he can wear rocks as armor.
I'm just imagining one of those flagstones people use for making porches. And
Right?
it's just this big flat stone.
Okay, we can go on. I had to imagine as an armorer and a fighter. I'm like, dude, that's all right.
So we have this excellent early plate mail. We move on. Like his men are like armored up and ready to go. They go through the forest. There's the bluff. He then decides, do what you can to protect yourselves while I try and scale it. So now I've got a rock strapped to my chest and I'm going to climb this bluff. Egil climbs, he succeeds in climbing the bluff, and lo and behold, there's these 8 men there trying to overpower him. But this is Egil, so he kills them all. And then he went to the edge of the bluff and started hurling stones, so there were no withstanding him. He kills a bunch of people, and then they sort of carry on, right? Like he ultimately deals with the Vermlander.
25 men in all died, including both of the brothers named Ulf. Only 5 escaped with their lives, all of them wounded or injured.
So,
Earl asked about Egil and his men. We have no idea how many of them were wounded. They attacked us with great bravery. When there were 8 of us and 4 of them, we fled, because that's the smart thing to do. 5 of us made it to the forest, and the other 3 died. As far as we could see, Egil and his men hadn't taken a scratch.
So in my version, it says they were bright as new pennies, which is an interesting translation. So he deals with that, and he goes back to Iceland eventually. Like he has his adventures, and he's like, you know what? Come out of the forest. We've got Thorfinn. They give everything. They were given a good welcome. Wounds were treated. They stayed there for several days. Helga, the farmer's comely daughter, is recovering from her illness, and this is when they find out.
That's when they find out about the love spell gone wrong.
And we eventually get kitted out. There's another minor ship chase. No, there's not. He gives Egil gets a merchant ship ready, and the long ship he brought from Denmark he gives to Thorsten as a parting gift. People keep giving each other ships, and I gotta think, like, these ships are intensely expensive.
Yeah.
And they're just like, have a boat, my guy. So if anybody's got a long ship laying around that they want to get rid of, I have the lifetime dream of sailing one up Kenai Lake. Hit me up. I'll take it. I'll write you a very nice poem in response. Yeah. Right? Like,
take me with you on your journey up the river.
Yes,
I'll join you.
In a heartbeat would I take the both of you. So they set out, they head back, and then they run into some Irish slaves. Irish slaves are always a problem in Iceland. There's actually a little island off the south of Iceland called Vestmannaeyjar, which means Westman Island. The Westmen, the Vestmen are men from Ireland. So because if you're in Iceland, they're in the east, but if you're in Scandinavia, they're like mainland Scandinavia. They're the men of the West. So that's where they kept, like, they had this whole issue at one point with Irish slaves down on that island. Later, there was a whole issue with the island trying to kill all its inhabitants with a volcano, which is pretty standard for Iceland, frankly.
Right.
Then we move on to, we do meet Geirmund Hellskin, who is actually a really fascinating figure. He's called Hellskin. So his mother is brought back from Siberia by his father. And she is described variously as having this very dark skin. And so that's where he gets the nickname Hellskin, as his skin is very dark as well.
Right.
So I have seen explanations ranging from she was Mongolian to she was maybe Nanets or one of the indigenous tribes of northern Siberia. And one version where somebody was trying to argue based on the description that she has dark skin, that she was from Africa. This description makes no sense when you read about the rest of her history and also understand that the people of northern Siberia also have dark skin, right? Yeah. So that translation was like, I don't think so, guys. But cool. So Geirmund Hellskin pops up. He has a son named Vali. This doesn't matter a whole lot. We also talk about some other relations. So we've got Grim Svertingesson in Modsfell. He's a wealthy man. His half-sister is Ranveig. She's married to Thorod the priest, and Ulfus, their son, was Skapti. We do this like begats.
There's a bunch of begats.
Right. In the 13th century, when everybody's reading this, they're like, oh, that's my, like, you can track back. There's my.
And this begat section also links perfectly with Laxdæla Saga.
Yes.
So if you know Laxdæla Saga and you get to this part, you're like, oh, Olaf Peacock. Oh, I know that guy. I know these people. Oh, that's that Thorberg. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it all just sort of clicks.
In this clears up the expanded Icelandic saga universe.
Yeah.
So that we're bringing phase 3 and phase 4 together very nicely.
Yeah. There's so much intertextuality with these. It's so fun.
So next we move on to some poetry, which is I think where we're trying to get so that Bersi could talk about his very favorite poetry.
Well, so in here, because we haven't gotten to that poetry part, are we getting to Egil's son's death?
So yes. I have fast forwarded to, I think in your book it's chapter 79.
Okay, give me 79. So Egil's son Bodvar has grown up by now, promising and handsome, big and strong, blah blah blah. Egil loved him dearly. One summer, Bodvar basically went out to trade, to something. He was on a boat. I don't remember.
Market. He was going to market.
He was going to market. He was going to go sell. Yeah, he was on the merchant ship. Anyway, ship sinks. So Egil's son is dead. Now Egil gets broody because he loses a bucket of silver. So his son is dead. In the end, the ship sank. Everybody was lost at sea. The following day, the bodies were washed up. Egil found, when he heard about the ship going down, he immediately rode off in search of the bodies. He found Bodvar's body, picked it up, put it across his knees, rode with it out to Skallagrim's burial mound, opened the burial mound, put Bodvar, his son, in with Dad, covered it all back up again. And then he went straight home, went to bed, locked the door, and nobody talked to him. It is said that when Bodvar was buried, Egil was wearing tight-fitting hose and a tight red fustian tunic laced at the sides. People say that he became so swollen that his tunic and hose burst off of his body. So we've talked about this before. He is swollen with grief. He's hulking out because of his grief. And then he finally, after the third day.
And so, can I get this section?
Yep.
I love this one. This is probably my favorite Old Norse poem ever.
Before we get to the poem, I want to hit Thorgerd because I love Thorgerd.
That's
what you're doing. Okay, do it.
The lead up and then into the.
Go for it. You got it.
Sure. So Thorgerd, one of Egil's daughters, and one of the brightest of them. She's quite clever here, and she apparently knows runes. She's as we'll see, she's well read, and she comes in and sets off at once from Borg. She's the one who's married Olaf Peacock, if you know Laxdæla Saga, and she comes directly to her father or she comes into the room, and Asgerd greets her and asks whether they've eaten their evening meal. And Thorgerd replied in a loud voice so everybody can hear, including Egil away in his bed closet. I have had no evening meal, nor will I do so until I join Freya, referring to dying. I know no better course of action than my father's. I do not want to live after my father and brother are dead, because Egil has been refusing food. He's not eating. He's not talking to anybody. He's completely cut himself off. He's like, I might as well just die. And she goes to the door and calls out, "Father, open the door. I want both of us to go the same way." Egil unfastens the door, brings her in, and she lays down on another bed that's in there. And Egil says, "You do well, my daughter, in wanting to follow your father, You have shown great love for me. How can I be expected to want to live with such great sorrow? And they're silent for a while. And then Egil notices that Thorgerd's doing something weird. What are you doing, daughter? Are you chewing on something? I thought we were going to die together, right? And she says, I'm chewing dulsa, which is a kind of seaweed that's really tough and kind of gross tasting, but it is an edible seaweed. Most seaweed is edible of some sort. And she says, because I think it'll make me feel worse because it's gross and tough. And so she's just gnawing on this dulsa. But I will point out that it is a seaweed and it comes from the ocean, which has lots of salt. So it is something that kind of parches you out because it's so salty and also kind of tough and gross. And so she says, because I think it'll make me feel worse. Otherwise, I expect I will live too long. I need to feel worse so I die faster. Is it bad for you? Says Egil. Very bad, says Thorgerd. Do you want some? What difference does it make? He said. And so he takes some and starts chewing. A little later, she called out for some water to drink, and she was brought something to drink. Then Egil said, that happens if you eat dulsa. It makes you even thirstier. Would you like a drink, father? She asked. She passed him the animal horn, and he took a great draught. Then Thorgerd said, we've been tricked. This is milk. Egil bit a lump of the horn as much as he could get his teeth into, then threw the horn away. And Thorgerd's like, oh no, what do we do? Our plan has failed. Now that I've eaten something, I want us to stay alive, father, long enough for you to compose a poem in Bodvar's memory, and I'll carve it onto a rune stick. Then we can die if we want to. I doubt whether your son Thorstein would ever compose a poem for Bodvar, and it's unseemly if his memory is not honored, because I do not expect us to be sitting there at the feast, the funeral feast, when it is. And Egil said that it was unlikely to be able to compose a poem even if he attempted to, but I will try. And so this poem.
And I love that there's also this, just a throwaway line. Another of Egil's sons, called Gunnar, had died shortly before.
Right. Well,
clearly not the favored son.
That's actually, so he's not the favorite son, but it's important to know because this poem is called Sonatorek, and it's of the loss of my sons. It is referring to both of his sons who have died. Okay. And so they include this, even though it's not the one that's really making the grief. He does talk about, like, I've lost my sons. In plural, and they don't want you to be confused. Wait, but I thought it was just one. And this poem, before, like, it's long. Before I read any of the verses, it's one of the very few examples of men who are very fodder in Norse society being allowed and showing a huge range of very deep emotion and grief and sorrow for a multitude of things. And the way this poem is structured is really, really interesting because it takes you through the concepts beautifully. Mm-hmm. He begins by saying, my tongue is sluggish for me to move. My poem's scales ponderous to raise. The god's prize, poetry, is beyond my grasp, though tough to drag out from my mind's haunts. Since heavy sobbing is the cause, how hard to pour forth from the mind's roots that prize that Frigg's progeny found, born of old from the world of giants. Essentially, I am having a really hard time writing this poem because I'm so dang sad. It's really hard for me to do this. My stock stands on the brink, pounded as plane trees on the forest's rim. No man is glad who carries the bones of his dead kinsman out of the bed. Yet I'll first recount my father's death, my mother's loss, and carry from my word shrine the timber that I build my poem from, leafed with language. So these beautiful allusions both to trees, and we start shifting. We've got a lot of meat of poetry imagery going on. So lots of kennings that involve liquids, and often meat of poetry use sea and ocean type things. And this, plus the fact that humans are often referred to as trees or timber.
Mm-hmm.
And then Egil shifts these metaphors into the boat and the water crashing against the boat, of course,
sea that
died on.
Yeah,
right?
The sea that took his son. Yeah, it's a fantastic poem.
The imagery just blends so lovely. And so we get to this part where he says, I always get my vengeance. I always get compensation for these things. But how do I fight the sea? The sea goddess has ruffled me, stripped me bare of my loved ones. The ocean severed my family's bonds, the tight knot that ties me down. If by sword I might avenge that deed, the brewer of waves would meet his end. Smite the wind's brother that dashes the bay, do battle against the sea god's wife. And so he says, I can't fight the ocean. I can't get compensation from the sea god. There's nothing I can do here. And what's more, even if I could raise a sword, yet I felt I lacked the might to seek justice against the killer of ships. For it is clear to all eyes how an old man lacks helpers. Egil is old at this point, and he's mourning the fact that he is actually sunk away from that Vater ideal into Blauther simply by being old and beginning to be disabled. You'll see his vision goes and his knees totally give out. So he just sort of hobbles around blindly for the last years of his life. And he said, the sea has robbed me of much. My son had lots of potential, and that was taken away from him before its time. That tree was cut down before it could bear fruit. And all of these other things, it's why haven't I? And then he basically ends it. The poem goes on. It's quite a long poem. I'm flipping several pages here. But he gets to a point where he says, I have my whole life been a great warrior and a great poet. I have been clearly one of Odin's favorites. Odin has granted me these things, but how am I to get to Valhalla and be at Odin's side if I don't have the death that should have been granted to me? It is a benefit to a warrior to die young and early before I get to this Blauther point of my life where I am incapacitated in these ways and so humiliated as a Viking man. And why has Odin forsaken me in this way, caused me all this grief? I don't even have a son who had so much promise and could continue my legacy and be that for me. He's been cut down. I've lost everything. And he, at the very end, he even says, I do not worship Vilir's brother, who is Odin, guardian of the gods, through my own longing, though in good ways too, the friend of wisdom has granted me redress for affliction. He who does battle and tackles the hell wolf gave me the craft that is beyond reproach, this poetry, and the nature that I could reveal those who plotted against me as my true enemies, his carving of runes onto the various things and figuring out that he was poisoned, stuff like that. Now my course is tough. Death, close sister of Odin's enemy, stands on the ness. With resolution and without remorse, I will gladly await my own. And that's his last verse of this poem. I'm ready to go. That's it. But as it says at the end of this chapter, Egil began to recover his spirits as he proceeded to compose the poem. And when it was finished, he delivered it to Asgerd and Thorgerd and his farmhands, left his bed, and sat down in the high seat. He called the poem The Lost of My Sons, Sonatorek. After that, Egil held a funeral feast according to ancient custom. Then Thorgerd went home. Egil presented her. When Thorgerd went home, Egil presented her with parting gifts. So by writing this poem, he manages to bring himself out of the doldrums and back into
Which is exactly what Thorgerd knew. Like,
exactly.
She's a clever girl there. Okay, I'm gonna vote. Oh my god, we're gonna make this like a 6-parter because we've been going an hour and 20. There I still have like a half dozen post-it notes in here on notes that I have. What do you say we pause here and pick it up next week?
Yeah.
Well, and we'll start next week with Arnbjorn.
And then
Arnbjorn's beautiful poem.
Arnbjorn's poem, because this is an amazing poem, and I think I would love to stop on the Sun's poem because that's a beautiful piece. And honestly, anybody that's
look it up.
People that are watching it, go look it up. Go read it.
It's so beautiful.
It really, really is amazing. And I bet, Kinheld, the your translation is because your poetry translations are better than ours. So
sometimes I like ours. Sometimes
Kinahild's
translation loses the kennings and the Haiti, and I don't like that.
Sometimes, yeah, it seems to be 50-50. Anyway, I'm going to vote we pause here.
Mm-hmm.
We will pick it up next week. We've got Arnbjorn's poem. We have a shield poem. I love the shield poem.
Can I very briefly, very, very quickly, way earlier, we wanted to see what that phrase, we don't usually get phrases of old, right? I love hearing an old phrase, right? So I found it in Old Norse.
Okay.
And my really rough translation is basically that one must tend to or cultivate oak, or can just be used for tree generally, which under which one shall live. So basically exactly what they said. I just have a really rough translation here. I did it word for word to make sure everything was good.
Right.
And that is at for verder eik at foga under skal bua. And I can I have that written. If you want to, I'll put it in the chat, I guess. I don't know where else to send it.
Yeah,
there
that's
it is.
Throw it in the chat.
I'm trying, there's this, I keep kind of Googling, and I need to go back through my favorites, I think is where I'll find it. But there's actually a really cool website that pulls out all of these sort of proverb-like things from Old Norse prose. And it's somewhere. I've got a link to it somewhere. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
There.
Yep. That when one must oak to cultivate, which under shall live, is sort of word for word what's going on there.
All right. So yeah, you gotta
cultivate what you're gonna live under, huh?
Right? Yeah. I mean, you gotta build what you want. You gotta,
Right.
But okay. Any other final thoughts before we cut loose? This in our next up in our 20-part series on Egil Saga. It was funny. A little aside for 30 seconds here. I was listening to Saga Thing on parts of Egil. So Saga Thing is my favorite podcast to listen to when I'm making beads because it's, I don't know, it just works really well for me. And they wound up doing 10 episodes. So we're, we're not doing too bad. This is a really, really, really long story. Okay. I think we are gonna cut loose. Let me go do the, all of our happy crap. All right. We will see everybody next week, 11 o'clock.
See you guys.